Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 601. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about beaches and museums, Venetian fortresses, Allied cemeteries, and the oldest civilization in Europe as we go to the island of Crete in Greece. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Without further ado, let's talk about Crete. I'd like to welcome Elizabeth from compassandfork.com, who's come to talk to us about Crete. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here, Chris.
And why are we talking about Crete?
I think we're talking about Crete because Crete is pretty underrated in terms of the Greek islands, and I think a lot of people overlook it as a place to go.
I agree. I was really pleased when you pitched me Crete because we had an amazing time there, and I'm surprised, and I think you are too, that we don't hear about it more often. I think it's got some of the nicest beaches in Europe, which, granted, isn't saying a lot, as I'm talking to somebody who's spent a lot of time living in Australia, but some great food and some great history.
Yes, I agree.
What kind of itinerary do you recommend?
I think it depends on what you want to go there to do. You could easily go and find a nice beach to sit on, and Crete is a huge island. It's 160 miles from the one end to the other. Mm-hmm. But if I was going for the first time, I'd either go to the middle or I'd go over near Anya, and I'd spend the entire week in one spot driving to what I wanted to do.
Okay.
If not, you're going to spend the whole time running around.
And we should, I guess I skipped a little bit here, we should put it on a map first. We're not talking about the country of Crete. We're talking about the island of Crete in the country of Greece. Large island, yes, as you mentioned, and in the southern portion of what makes up Greece. Okay, so you started us where?
I would go over and I'd stay near Anya, which is spelled like Chania, but it's pronounced with no CH. So it's Chani.
Now, we heard that called Chania.
Yes. It's spelled many different ways. You also see it's spelled with an X. Everything in Greece is spelled 3 different ways. I'm not quite sure why. But Google Maps then doesn't work very well either. I don't think it knows what to call things. But I would probably go overstay by there, which is if you're looking at the north of Crete, it would be over on the west, toward the west of Crete. So it's easy to get into. It has its own airport, and you can also take the ferry direct to there if you're coming from another island, or if you're coming from Athens, you can take an overnight ferry to there.
Right, yeah. We took the fast ferry in from Santorini. We did it to the other end of the island, well, at more the middle of the northern end to Heraklion. But the fast ferry works well if you're adding this on to a trip to other islands in the Aegean, then that works. So we're flying in directly. I think we flew out.
Yes.
And why are we going to Chania? What are we going to see?
Anya has a beautiful old Venetian harbor and an old town there. And it's a big enough town that there's actually plenty of things to do in the town and plenty of restaurants to eat in. So you're going to get your history fix. But it's also close enough that you can drive out and find some fantastic beaches if you want to spend a couple of days relaxing by the beach.
So when we go to Chania, what are we going to do?
Anya is a big enough town that there's plenty to do within the town itself. So it has a old town that has a lot of Venetian history in it. So we're just wandering around in there, looking at the shops, tons of restaurants, beautiful harbor area that you can go along. You can do horse-drawn carriage rides along the harbor to explore. Lots of eateries and bars along that harbor as well. Beautiful place to see the sunset. The icon for the harbor area is the Egyptian lighthouse, so called because it was rebuilt by the Egyptian army following an earthquake. And that's probably the picture you will see most often of the town. As well, there's a pretty good market in town that has both fresh food, but it also has a lot of little eateries in it. So you can go around and explore in the market. Crete is very proud of their food and their natural products, including honey, olive oil. So they find lots of things like that in the local market, which make good things to take home as well, because they're in a bottle and it's easy enough to take with you.
As well as stacks and stacks of olives and cheese and things like that may not travel quite as well.
Correct. That you need to eat while you're there. There's
That's
plenty
right.
of opportunities to eat while you're there. For us, we found some beautiful restaurants in that along the harbor as well, including some beautiful fresh seafood restaurants where it's the catch of the day.
Any particular restaurants that you would recommend, or are we just going to go down there and wait for one of the kalamaki to entice us?
In Anya itself, I would say one of our favorite restaurants was actually Christosamos, and that one is actually traditional food. So they have a wood-fired oven and specialize in meat, as well as probably any of the seafood restaurants right along the harbor itself are good. My tip would be don't sit in the very first seat along the harbor. You get bothered by every busker that comes by. If you're one row back, you'll enjoy your meal without being bothered. There's a lot of entertainment that comes along in the form of local musicians and children trying to sell you small souvenirs and things like that. So if you're one row back, you'll enjoy your meal. And Glacistos is a good one on the harbor, and it's over on, if you're standing facing the water, it's further up toward the right-hand end of the harbor.
And we should say when we talk about the harbor here, we're not talking about something very large. So you could walk from one end to the harbor to the other in 5 minutes, maybe tops?
I'd say probably 15 minutes if you actually go from one end all the way around the curve, because it's in a little bit of a U shape.
Okay.
And the whole harbor is just lined in restaurants,
right?
Basically. So you can find whatever you want. If you come down for sunset and want a view to see sunset, you probably need to come a little bit early because it's a popular spot for sunset. And if not, you'll end up inside rather than outside to get the view.
Well, and we didn't say that really most of the seating is outside. And on a lovely summer day especially, you're going to want to be sitting in one of those outside seatings, almost like outside living rooms, some of these places along the harbors in northern Crete.
Very much so. And we were there even in October, and it's still beautiful. To sit outside. One of the things we did find quite interesting is even though it's a town that you would think kind of goes all year round, by October a lot of things are actually closing, parts of their restaurants or parts of what they're doing for the season already. And the weather's still beautiful, the water's still warm for swimming, etc., but it's pretty much the end of the season there. The other thing that you can do from there quite easily is take a boat ride. There's lots of boats there in the harbor that actually offer day trips if you want to go out for either fishing or snorkeling, swimming, or just to enjoy a day out on a boat. So that's actually quite easily, and you can just arrange it on the day pretty much or the day before if the weather is going to be nice. There's no need to have a great plan ahead of time. Just find a boat that suits your style. They vary in size. So if you want something smaller, you can find something smaller. If you want something larger, those are around as well.
Okay. Anything else that you were going to recommend in Chania?
I would say that's probably it. It's a lovely, lovely old town, very Venetian looking. There's a nice history museum along the harbor as well in one of the old warehouse buildings. But depending on what else you've done around Crete, you might be historied out.
Well, we just got started, so if we're assuming they haven't yet, I'm going to actually suggest something in Chania, which is there is a British cemetery, which seems like it might be an odd place to find it just outside of the city, which is dedicated to the Brits who were killed in World War II, who came to defend the island when it was invaded by the Germans by one of the largest airborne invasions in history, and the Battle of Crete happened in this area. It happened quite all over the place, but you'll find that if you're interested in that. And then we did a drive up into the hills to a restaurant up in the hills with someone who lived in the area, someone who runs a bed and breakfast in the area, American expat, and it's a beautiful countryside. Although driving in Crete is challenging at times, I would say. We drove the length of the road from Heraklion to Chania, including Heraklion, Rethymno, and Chania. And one of the challenging things about the highway, it's a good road, but it's a 2-lane road. They drive as a 4-lane road. So you literally drive with your tires 3 feet over the line to the right on the shoulder, so that you can be passed by some Lamborghini or something as you're driving. And I was struck by the fact that every once in a while you'd see these little tiny Greek Orthodox church models about 1.5 feet large on the side of the road, and those are memorials for somebody who was killed in an auto accident on the highway. And I just wasn't sure that a little model of a Lutheran church, my home church, would look out of place there if I was run off the road by one of these people. But it was an interesting experience. Not as bad as places we've talked about, like Cairo or Turkey or something like that, but a little more challenging than a lot of the rest of Europe in terms of driving.
Yes, and they very much do drive on that shoulder. And if you're not driving on the shoulder, then it's actually quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they expect you to pass in the middle of the road. Even if it's double yellow lines, that doesn't stop somebody from passing you. So, yes, we found that you have to be very aware when you're driving.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is no getting in your lane and just paying attention to the lines, because somebody will come up behind you quite quickly and pass you in the middle. So, yes, you need to be over in that shoulder, which also means it's quite slow driving, really. And you're correct. The road infrastructure is quite good, but it's quite slow, and they definitely use the 4-lane system on 2.
Yeah, I'd say driving around town wasn't a problem at all. Even driving some of the mountain roads, I don't think bothered me that much, or riding. I guess I wasn't driving during that part. It's just the main highways that they drive just a little crazy, a little more enthusiastically than are probably appropriate for the conditions.
And we were laughing because one of our hotels sent us driving directions, and mentioned that you need to be driving on the shoulder.
Oh, see, that would have been helpful to know,
So it is
actually.
definitely the norm. We were used to it from other places we've traveled. But yes, I thought it was interesting that they did actually even mention it in the directions they sent.
But the interesting thing is, I don't know that I've seen that elsewhere in Greece. I mean, I haven't been all over Greece, but I've been in the mainland. I've been to some of the other islands, and this is the only one that I really saw that. So that's just useful to know.
I've not seen it in Greece, yes, but they drive like that in Turkey.
Well, yeah, but Turkey, they also, when they come up to a light, they form 5 lanes. It's true. It is closer to what they do there, where you'll be driving down the middle of the road and there'll be a bus that is straddling the middle line. Cool. Well, what else do we want to do next?
We probably want to get out of town for a little bit. So we could head inland and over toward Rethymnon, up into the hills. A really nice place to go and visit. Rethymnon is actually a nice town as well, which has an old Venetian harbor. It's not nearly as large.
So you and I are going to say all of these names differently, aren't we? I'm going to say Rethymno.
Yeah. Yes, because some people spell it N-O and some people spell it M-O-N.
which this shows you how inconsistent the spelling is because now the pronunciation is also inconsistent. Okay. Yeah, beautiful city. Some of the better beaches that we saw on the northern shore in terms of swimming beaches. And again, I think some of the best beaches I've seen in Europe.
Yes, along there are some lovely beaches, and along the west coast, actually, there's some nice beaches too. So we'll talk about that one as another day trip. But
Okay.
so over by Rethymno, the town is actually quite nice. And then inland from there is actually quite nice as well. And going up into the mountains gives you a totally different perspective. One, because you get these beautiful water views from up on the mountains, but also the food changes quite a bit as well. Down by the ocean front and the water, there's a lot more seafood present. When you go up, there's a lot more, I guess, traditional foods that are more meat-based as well as legumes. It's quite a big part of their diet and a traditional part of their diet. And also wineries. So you can find some wineries. And Greece isn't known, let's be honest, it's not known for great wine, but they actually have some really good wine. So if you head inland, you'll see some of the wineries growing along the hilltops where it's cooler and there's more rain as well. So it starts to become quite a bit greener as you head inland. So one of the historic sites that's over by Rethymno is the Arcady Monastery, which is quite famous from a massacre that happened there when they were battling the Turks. So Crete, if we talk about more recent history of Crete, Crete was controlled by the Turks for some time period, which they consider it to be an invasion by the Turks that was unwanted. So when they started to try and, I guess, become independent from Turkey and rule themselves, there was an important battle in Crete's history that went on at this monastery. And they lost, and instead of being taken, they ended up blowing themselves up. So there's a memorial to them there, and the monastery itself is quite nice. It's quite huge, and it also has a small museum in there where you can learn a bit about the Greek Orthodox Church as well and what the use of monasteries were in Crete.
Was this in the 1800s during the Wars of Independence? Or because I know the Turks burned down the city in the 1500s, so I didn't know which time period we're in there.
Yeah, I think it's the 1850s one.
Okay, during probably the first War of Greek Independence.
Yes, because the site is actually quite old.
Well, and the other thing that I would recommend is walking up to the Fortezza of Rethymno, which is built during the first battles between the Turks and the Venetians, which was fought here. And so you can go up and see lovely views of the city from the fortress up above the city. It only takes maybe an hour to visit, take you away from the beach for about an hour. What else are we doing?
So if you want to go to what Crete considers some of their best beaches, you can head west down into the southwest corner of Greece. There is a beach called, and I'm sure this is not how they pronounce this beach, Elefantisi Beach, which is a just stunning beach. The beach actually has a pinkish tinge to it. So it's quite beautiful. It gets very crowded, though, and they actually run quite a few bus trips from there. So it's easy to get to if you don't have a car. You can hop on the bus, but you might want to pick your time and go either early in the morning or go later in the afternoon to avoid the really busy time of the beach. But it is absolutely stunning, and I can see why they are so proud of that beach. It actually gets rated as one of the best beaches in Europe quite often.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's probably a good day trip out of there. The other thing that's actually recommended to do quite often is to hike the gorge from there, but we did not do that actually. It has a season.
So this is the Samaria Gorge, which is a slot canyon.
Yes. And it does have a season. It's closed in the winter.
Because of rain, I would assume.
Yes.
Flash flood warnings.
And we were coming up close to that season, and we didn't go. Never mind that we had no rain while we were there, but we didn't actually go. So, yes, the Samaria Gorge is another thing that actually most guidebooks will tell you to do. And again, your accommodation can organize that. That's one that actually is good to do a bus ride for because it's a one-way hike. So you need transport back around to wherever you would have left your car versus if you take the bus, then they arrange to pick you back up at the other end and bring you back up to town. So that's on our list for next time we go.
Exactly. I was going to say we didn't manage to do it, but it looked spectacular. As somebody who loves slot canyons and that kind of hike where you've got the walls of rock on both sides, as long as there's not a flash flood, it sounds like it would be a really terrific hike for next time.
Yes, and that's what I agree. The pictures of it look spectacular. And even the little villages like down along the coastline where you end up look quite nice, but we didn't actually manage to do it while we were there either. So yes, it's on the list for the next time.
Okay. Anything else we want to do?
The other thing that we did manage to do was we stopped in to see cheese being made, fresh cheese being made. Cheese is a huge part of the diet in Crete, and there are a couple of dairies along the way. And the other thing we did manage to do is go and see raki being made. So raki is very common.
Oh, yeah.
And anywhere you will eat in Crete, they will give you raki to end the meal, which is a lovely custom. It's not a tourist activity, so to speak, and I can see why. It's kind of like going to see somebody make moonshine.
I think that's a very good analogy, and that would be probably a good description of the taste as well. that or rocket fuel or something. I don't know. I don't think I developed a taste for it.
No, well, it's interesting. We got a couple that were flavored, and I have to say, if you get it flavored, sometimes with honey.
Oh, okay.
And over on the East Coast, we got one flavored with honey and pomegranate. And it was beautiful. Put a little caveat on that. It's beautiful for raki. It still tastes like moonshine, but at least it has some taste.
The other thing that the same day that we had raki, we were up in a restaurant well above Chania, and it was at a traditional restaurant. And one of the things that we had, the dish that I really did like, and I'm embarrassed to say it on the show, it's a rice dish, and it's kind of like a pilaf, but it is traditionally made for the wedding feast, and what they call it is copulating rice. So I don't know how to say that in Greece, but that's how it was described to us. It is basically rice that is intended to encourage the couple to be fruitful and multiply. But it was a very good dish. I would definitely order it again, although only if I could get over the embarrassment of ordering it again.
We had it in a village closer over to Heraklion, and it was called wedding rice.
Okay,
which
see,
is a
that I
little
could
less
order.
embarrassing to order. Yeah.
I think...
And my description would have been that it was like a risotto. It was...
Yeah, you're right. That's a better...
It was made with lamb stock.
That is a better description.
We were laughing because we could not believe that something so simple was so good.
Yes.
It was like, oh. Yes, there's a beautiful restaurant in the town of Arhanis called Kritamon that does traditional Crete foods, and they have a very, very nice version of wedding rice.
Well, that is apparently less of a direct translation from the Greek.
Yeah.
We were there with some Greek Americans who were hosting us, and so they were telling us more the traditional name, let's just say. You mentioned Heraklion. As long as we're talking about that, and now this is no longer a day trip from Chania. This would be something that if you're going to go this far, I would spend the night. But I would recommend getting this far to the east, because just outside of Heraklion is Knossos, which is the ruins from the Minoan civilization. And if you are a history buff, as I am, this is someplace you should go, not because it's the best preserved or the best excavated of the ruins. In fact, it was one of the earlier ruins that were excavated as modern archaeology started. So they did things in what we would now consider a questionable way in many ways, but it's a historically very significant because this is the oldest civilization in Europe. This predates the Greece of Socrates, which was 4th century BC, and even the Greece of the Trojan War, which is 13th or 12th century BC. This is old. And this was the power in the Mediterranean probably up until the volcano at Santorini erupted and tidal waves sunk the fleet here. And that caused the rise of the civilization on mainland Greece. The civilization that is the one that is the time of the Trojan War. So this is the palace of King Minos, who we have having the Minotaur in his labyrinth, although there is no labyrinth in Knossos, and there probably was never a Minotaur, but this is where you could find that. And so definitely something I would get a tour and get a guide who is knowledgeable when you go through this. But we found it very interesting.
Well, it's the most visited site on all of Crete. And it is the oldest thing around. And it is, I think it's very fascinating that that is considered the birthplace of civilization for Europe. Because there are things that if you keep going into like more the Middle East and stuff, you find things that are older. But this is the
Sure.
oldest you're going to find in Europe.
Right.
So yes, I'd say it's very worthwhile to stop. And I would agree. If you drive over there, it's several hours drive. You might as well go over and stay a couple of nights and do something else over on that side of the island.
Well, and Heraklion is yet another beautiful port city with lots of restaurants and another fortress and things like that. So it itself is worth seeing as well. Yeah, we did the come into Heraklion and go out of Hanya.
Yes. And there's a lot of wineries on that side of the island as well.
Oh,
If
okay.
you head inland again, we stayed actually up in the hills at a winery. And then the town of Arhanis that we were talking about for the wedding rice, there's a lot of wineries around there, including the oldest wineries over from Europe. And the oldest wine press is actually found up in that area. So there's a lot of history kind of in that area. And if you're going to Crete, I'd say you probably have some interest in history, because if you were just interested in the beaches, I'm not sure that would be your pick of where to go. So from a history point of view, I would agree with you. Going to spend a few days over on that side would be very worthwhile.
Okay.
And that's the east side of the island.
Well, it's almost still more the middle. There's a whole half the island to the east of Heraklion, so we're still not that far east. And I honestly can't tell you anything about further east. So
we did go further east to that coast as well. And that's probably where a lot of people will go if they're headed there for a week at the beach.
Okay.
There's a lot of five-star resorts kind of things around Agios Nikolos and Aloundra.
Okay.
And there are some nice beaches over on that side of the island as well. The history part of that is there's an island over there that was a leper colony, Spinalonga, which is also a very historic site. It's a separate island that you take a boat ride out to. You can take the boat ride from Agios Nikolos or Aloundra. And that is the second most visited site on Crete, apparently. We didn't actually go out to the island. You can see it from the shore, but that's also a very common day trip on that side. And on that side, again, the beautiful seafood and places to sit around and enjoy the beach or the traditional Greek taverna with a long lunch.
Excellent. What surprised you about Crete?
A couple of things surprised me about Crete. One's not actually that Cretan, but one thing that surprised us that we've laughed about many times is there are a ton of fur stores, as in a winter fur coat to buy on Crete, which I find just amazing because it's very warm there. I don't know why I'd be buying one there. And we found it very interesting because we were there in October that it closes for the winter because they still have beautiful weather, beautiful beaches. It seems like it would be a year-round destination, especially if I'm coming from Northern Europe. But probably by mid to late October, everything closes and it doesn't reopen until around Easter.
Huh. And we say everything closes, so restaurants, some of the shops.
Yep, restaurants, shops, some of the hotels, a lot of the larger resorts. The major towns, the cities, Anya and Heraklion would still be open, right? But if you're heading out to do smaller things, then no, they tend to close, which we were a bit surprised by because the water was still warm. You could still swim in the ocean when we were there. The pools were cold because the pools aren't heated.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, which we also found interesting because where we come from, that people solar heat their pools. So you would think you just kind of, they have beautiful sunshine. Why wouldn't you solar heat the pools at the resorts? But no, most of the pools were freezing cold. So we ended up swimming in the ocean. But yeah, it all kind of closes down by late October, which we found very interesting and did not expect.
Yeah, no, that does come as a surprise. So now your blog focuses a fair amount on food. Did you mention everything you wanted to in terms of dishes we should try?
Probably one of the big dishes to try is, and you will find it everywhere, and it varies from place to place, is horta, which is wild greens, which is basically any types of herbs, spinaches, things. Some are quite native to Crete, but some are things that you would find elsewhere. They tend to steam them and serve them with butter and a squeeze of lemon, or olive oil and a squeeze of lemon, and they're fantastic. And everywhere we had them, they're fantastic and quite healthy for you. So that's probably one. Horta is Horta. Another really nice dish to try in Crete is apaki, which is a smoked pork dish.
Mhm.
And it is pork that is kind of marinated in herbs and then wrapped and then smoked. So it's preserved,
Hmm.
a lot of times in leaves. So it actually is picking up the taste of the leaves as well. And I couldn't tell you the name of the street that it was on, but we found this wonderful little place in Rethimo where this
Mhm.
guy makes pastry. And it is long, thin, thread-like pastry that they use in Greek desserts and sweets.
Mhm. Sure.
He has a machine that there's actually a post on our blog, and you can see him doing it. But he makes it on this machine by hand, and he's been in the same little factory for over 60 years making this pastry every single day. And I don't know which is more amazing, watching him make the pastry or the fact he's been there for 60 years. And him and his wife run this, and they make this. It's called Cantai Ifi. It's Cantaifi. I'm sure I'm butchering the Greek. And phyllo pastry from hand. So you can see them make both of them in hand. And if you've never seen phyllo pastry made by hand either, it's quite amazing to watch them do these really thin sheets of pastry.
I don't know that I've seen it made, but I have certainly appreciated that effort on many occasions. Anything made with
Yes,
phyllo.
yeah, it's not something you would make at home, and it's very common in Greek cooking.
Yep.
Yeah, but one of those to buy for most of us, I think.
Is there anything that people would recommend you see on Crete that you would recommend we skip?
There was another beach that was recommended to us to go to see that was Thalassarna Beach, which is also over on the west coast, but closer to like the northwest corner.
Mhm.
And we drove over to it. We didn't actually find it that amazing of a beach that it was worth driving that far for.
Okay, so certainly anybody who's coming from Australia, don't spend a lot of time driving out to beaches that are spectacular.
No. The other beach we discussed earlier, the Elafanisi Beach, is actually quite nice and probably is worth a drive. And in general, I think the beaches there are actually quite nice. But yes, this beach, it's kind of an hour and a half drive. It's like, no. They're quite proud of it, though.
Okay.
I don't think I'd be headed to Crete to buy a fur either, to be honest, but obviously somebody does.
No, I don't think I'd be headed anywhere to buy a fur. As we go to wrap this up, you're standing in the prettiest spot in Crete. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
I'm probably standing on the harbor in Anya, and I'm looking at the lighthouse,
Okay.
I think. It's quite spectacular.
It's not large, just pretty.
Yes,
as
I agree with
lighthouses
that.
go.
It's very quaint, actually, would be my description. It's not a big harbor. It's just very quaint.
Okay. One thing besides the fur that makes you laugh and say only in Crete.
Raki at every meal.
Yeah, I think you...
Including we even had breakfast pancakes with raki.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay.
So, yes.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize Crete in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Crete in 3 words: delicious, friendly, and affordable.
Excellent. And I would say under-visited. This is not one of those places that we talk about that is over-touristed. This is a place that you should get to, and I'm surprised that more people don't.
Yes, I think that's part of why it's still so affordable.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably right. So don't do that. Don't listen to us.
Yeah.
Go to Santorini.
Yeah.
Our guest again has been Elizabeth from compassandfork.com. And Elizabeth, we wanted to send people to your best post on Crete. Where are we going to send them?
We would send them to a post called How to Plan Your Crete Itinerary.
Excellent.
We go through options for if you had 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. What would you do on Crete?
Terrific. Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can see that either at the website for Amateur Traveler or in the show you were listening to. If you look in the lyrics, we have links to all the things that we have talked about. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on and for pitching Crete, because I agree that this is a lovely destination.
Yes, and I hope more people do discover it. It has a lot to do on it, and I think it gets overlooked for some of its more glitzy neighbors.
In news of the community, Omar left a comment on the show that we did last week on Chengdu and said, "Hi, Chris, I found this podcast about a year ago, and I've been a dedicated listener since. As someone who has explored the Sichuan region, I was looking forward to this podcast episode. Another other side trip I would recommend is going to Jiuzhaigou National Park. From Chengdu, it is mostly accessible via an 8-hour bus ride, but it is definitely worth it, especially if you love the outdoors. Due to the earthquake that occurred in the region last year, it's currently closed, but it's scheduled to reopen in May of 2018. I would definitely recommend it as my favorite stop in a 3-week China trip. I love the podcast and looking forward to many more episodes. Omar. Thanks so much, Omar, and thank you for the tip about Chengdu. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com or do what Omar did. Leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more